In the past month, my older brother's fiancée left him. This meant he lost his house because the home they lived in was in her name. He lost his vehicle because what he was driving was her old car. He also lost his job because he was so focused on his breakup that he was constantly making mistakes. He moved in with our parents, who live about 5 minutes away from my husband and I. I do have a lot of sympathy for him. He literally has nothing, no home, no car, no job, no relationship. The problem is, this is third time this has happened to him. That's right, he has had 3 fiancées leave him now, and every time he winds up losing everything. He has had 2 cars impounded because he gets so upset over his breakups he loses his job and can't make payments on his vehicles. My parents and I have bailed him out of these situations every time. I even paid off his back payments on his car, paid for his dog's vet bills, and paid some of his rent before. My parents and I have literally spent thousands of dollars trying to help him. Each of the past 2 times he winds up moving back in with my parents, who are in their late 60s. While we pay for everything for him, whenever he goes through a breakup he becomes a total jerk. He spends every weekend with his friends out camping or vacationing. How he pays for it I have no idea. After the second fiancée, he took a trip to Fiji with his friends but couldn't afford to pay his rent. He mostly ignores me unless he needs money, which, during this breakup, I am refusing to help him out at all. The worst part is he treats my parents like garbage. If they ask him questions like, "Have you been looking for a job?" he will yell at them. He has no problem eating the food they provide for him and living in their house rent and utility free. And driving my mom's brand new car, which she got because he totaled her last car, but makes them absolutely miserable. My mom told me he will yell at them, call her stupid, trashes their house, sleeps all day, and leaves the care of his dog up to them. Every time I see my mom lately, it's obvious that she's been crying. The most recent event took place on Sunday. In an attempt to get him out of the house for a while, I offered to take him out in our boat. He seemed super excited about it, and when he's excited he can actually be a lot of fun to be around. He tells me he's hanging out with friends but will be back in town Sunday afternoon. Sunday afternoon rolls around and he's nowhere to be seen. I get a text around 6 p.m. that he's decided to go to a local tourist destination with all his friends. They are going to tube down a river. I'm bummed because I was honestly looking forward to it, and because my brother has once again chosen his friends over his family. But it's whatever, I honestly don't rely on him for anything, so it's not that big of a deal. But then I find out he's driving my mom's car and she has to be in her office early Monday morning. Then the peaceful protests in our town turn into full-on riots, and my brother is still not home. At this point he can't get home because they've blocked off access to our town, so he just stays with his friends, and I wind up taking my mom to work. My dad tries to talk to my brother on Monday about how irresponsible he was, and my brother just yells at him, and then locks himself in my parents' basement for the rest of the day. My parents are miserable. They want to help and have always said they will do anything for us kids. But they are just enabling my brother every time they bail him out. My dad has major health problems that are being exacerbated by the stress my brother is causing. My mom has a history of severe depression that I see her slipping back into the longer my brother is with them. I'm really close to my parents, and they are usually very fun people. The longer my brother stays with them, I am seeing them become depressed, short-tempered, and miserable. I tried telling them to kick him out. One of his friends would surely take him in. But they insist that they don't want to leave him homeless. I can't convince them to kick them out, but is there anything else I can say or do that might get my brother to get his head out his ass and get a job? How can I get my brother to see his behavior towards my parents is unacceptable? It just sucks. I used to really look up to my older brother because he is outgoing and funny and the sort of person everyone just gravitates towards. Now I'm just pissed at him for how he treats my parents, and simultaneously scared for his mental health, because he clearly has a lot of problems. I am a 16-year-old female. I used to have a good relationship with my mother. That has since crashed and burned since she dated and married my stepdad, Gary, 6 years ago. Gary treats his son Ian, 19 male, like he's the center of the universe and expects my mother to as well, so she does. Anything Ian wants, Ian gets, and that usually comes at the expense of me. Ian wanted my room when they moved it. I was forced to go to another room to make the transition easier for everyone. Ian wanted a car for his 16th birthday. I didn't get braces for another year. Ian wanted to go on an expensive trip for spring break. I had to give up volleyball to make it happen. Ian wanted to have his side of the family over. I was expected to find somewhere else to be, since I wasn't family. My mother just went along with all of this and acted like it shouldn't affect me at all. My dad was overseas for a long time, and we used to FaceTime, and he was so upset by what he was hearing. He's home now and he's offering to have me come live with him. I'm not seeing a reason not to go, and so I told my mom I wanted to go live with my dad. She predictably freaked out and asked why I'd want to do that and said that we had such a good relationship. She didn't understand how this came so out of the blue. I told her that we haven't had a good relationship since she blindly decided to follow Gary's lead and give Ian anything he wanted, and it always came at my expense. My mom tried to argue, so I said I also wanted to leave because she let them kick me out of my own house because I wasn't family. So I was going to go live with someone who was. My mom started crying and said she wouldn't let me go. So I told her that my dad was willing to go to court over it and I was old enough to be able to say where I wanted to be. She's been a crying mess since I told her, and Gary is being a jackass about how awful I'm being. He was. ING at me about how terribly I'm treating them and how I'm not thinking about them at all. I asked why should I. He never thought of me when he was taking things from me to give to his kid. I said let's face facts here, you don't care about me, what you care about is losing the child support you spend on your son. He sort of went slack-jawed and I walked off. My dad said my mom called and threatened to take him to court, so he said he'd see her there. Now she's panicking because she realized he is planning on taking her to court over this. Mom and Gary of course think I'm the asshole for making things hard for everyone. But my dad and grandparents say to leave and never look back. About 5 years ago my now estranged daughter, Edie, cheated on her boyfriend, Brad, and got together with a guy, Ken. He quickly started isolating her from family and my husband and I from her kids. Brad had moved back to his home state devastated after the breakup. I discussed red flags her. I let her know we are here for her and concerned. Her and Ken suddenly took off and moved to another state. For 5 months, my husband I worried about her and the kids as we had n//c at all with them. One day CPS showed up at our door with the oldest child. He was obviously injured from abuse that was reported by the school. We had no idea they had moved back to the area. We agreed to take them in. The next 20 months were traumatic, complicated, emotional, and difficult for everyone. Through it we re-established a relationship with the older child's dad, Dan. Daughter failed to comply with her plan and remained with Ken. Dan worked hard to get custody of his child and he gave Edie scheduled weekly phone calls. She called oldest child 2x nothing since. We agreed to permanent custody of youngest. In the process, I put aside the hurt Edie caused and agreed to scheduled weekly phone calls and supervised visits in person when schedules allowed. Legally, any or no contact is at my sole discretion. Ken was not allowed to interfere //attend. Edie quit calling //scheduling visits after 3 months. I reset the call schedule to 1 month. No calls. 6 months later she calls and wanted me to drop everything for a visit the following day. I couldn't because I had to go back to work. Calls stopped again. She left Ken, has a new BF. I know nothing else about her life / whereabouts. She started calling again about a year ago and I let her know that if she was consistent with her monthly scheduled calls, we would move towards weekly calls again. She called 2 months in a row, skipped a couple months, then called 2 more months in a row. Last one happened to be night before child's birthday. She asked him what he wanted for his birthday. He said a call from her. The next day, as he blew out candles, he said, "My mom is gonna call now." He had the biggest smile on his face. Call never came. He refused my offer to call her. We survived an emotional meltdown. Next month, no call, just a text after with a lame timing excuse as to why and sorry about the birthday call, she didn't feel well. Following month, I get a text that Edie feels ill again, won't be calling. I am beyond frustrated at this point. I have looked past her refusal to rebuild a relationship with us, but when it comes to the kids my heart aches for them. Hey race where I might be the I responded, parents do not get sick time. We all had COVID recently, including me, and I still took care of the children. If you do not have any time for him once a month, I don't want my time wasted with your excuses. Of course, calls stopped again. Tim and I met in an English literature class our junior year of college, and we've been together the 10 years since. While he ended up going into IT, I stayed in the liberal arts track and ended up doing non-profit work after college when I realized I didn't actually want to be a school teacher. Just to say that we always assumed he'd out-earn me by a considerable margin. Though when he made more, I always insisted we split things evenly to avoid potential resentment down the road. I've had sort of a non-linear career path, but ended up switching to the corporate world. To make a long story short, my liberal arts degree and time doing non-profit work gave me a lot of skills that enable me to really excel professionally in some more niche areas. I recently started a new job as a consultant, making way more than I'd ever anticipated. When I got the offer, I told Tim that the pay was amazing, but he didn't ask about the actual amount, and I didn't want to be braggy about it, especially since I was fairly sure it was above his current income. Well, we just put in an application for a new place, and in the process of having to submit our pay stubs, it's become obvious that I make roughly 30% more than he does now. I expected him to think that was cool, since he's a feminist and has always been super supportive of my career. But instead he started to make increasingly harsh jabs about how I cheated the system to get where I am. That no English Lit major makes more than a cybersecurity professional without cheating somehow. His major point is that I got my first job out of nepotism, which set me up to trample more qualified people who didn't have the same advantages. It's true that I got my first post-college job after being referred by a sorority sister, but it was for non-profit work making $22K /year, not exactly at somebody's daddy's firm. He also points out that at my first corporate job, I snagged a big promotion after volunteering to take on starting up the company's diversity /equity /inclusion program, and I'll admit that were I a white man, it's highly unlikely I would have been able to be the face of the eventually high-profile diversity program. Tim also notes that I was awarded a small college scholarship for being a promising female writer, when no such scholarship existed for males. But all that said, I still don't feel like I cheated the system, and it makes me angry to listen to him joke about it. Especially since I grew up blue-collar and worked full-time while going to school full-time to afford my degree. I reached a breaking point yesterday when he made a crack about how the new / first woman on his team is an obvious diversity hire. I told him that his jokes about women cheating the system to get ahead aren't funny or guy talk ribbing, as he says. They make him sound like an insecure little boy. He told me I was being a naive Karen, and we haven't really talked since yesterday.